So, you know, these guys don't play by any rules. They break everything.
We all want to live in a country where we respect the law. So I'm a bit surprised that Republicans aren't up in arms with Trump detaining and deporting U.S. citizens and people who are lawfully present here in the United States. What Trump and ICE are doing is a disgrace, and it's all being done without respect for our law.
But I also want to defend Melania real quick. Not everybody could marry Donald Trump, and I think that's quite an achievement. So I think she deserves credit for that. Nobody up here could have done it.
You sure right, I couldn't do it.
Mostly because they thought he was a good businessman, but that is just because he's a Nepo baby.
It only looks like he's even more guilty. And here's the deal. Guilty of what? I don't know.
Let me remind y'all that Melania, the First Lady, a model, and when I say model, I'm not talking about Tyra Banks, Cindy Crawford, or Naomi Campbell level, applied for and was given an EB-1 visa. And what that stands for is an Einstein visa. Now,
and then I have a very tall son named Barron. Has anyone ever heard of him? AOC, look, I think she's very nice, but she's very low IQ, and we really don't need low IQ.
The idea that Trump and my Republican colleagues want to restore integrity and security in the visa process is actually a joke.
Why did Barron Trump, one of the most private members of the Trump family, suddenly feel the need to call the cops? And what does it have to do with a congresswoman's claim about a $137,000 flower bill? Stick around because this wild story gets even crazier. Before we move on, I would like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. How does someone spend $137,000 on flowers? Like, were they flown in daily from the gardens of Versailles? That's the question Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had when she took aim at Melania Trump's spending habits. During a heated segment on live TV, Crockett didn't shy away from raising eyebrows about what she called outrageous misuse of taxpayer dollars. According to her, Melania's office reportedly billed an astronomical amount for floral arrangements during her time as First Lady. Now, sure, we all like to spruce up our homes now and then, but when Jasmine Crockett heard this, she wasn't just questioning the expense, she was pointing to a bigger issue: accountability. But wait, the flower bill wasn't the only thorn in Melania's garden. Crockett also threw some shade at the so-called Einstein visa Melania was granted back in 2001.
Confused as to why my Republican colleagues aren't talking about the lack of integrity when it comes to the president's family's visas. Let me remind y'all that Melania, the First Lady, a model, and when I say model, I'm not talking about Tyra Banks, Cindy Crawford, or Naomi Campbell level, applied for and was given an EB-1 visa. And what that stands for is an Einstein visa.
Now, for those who don't know, the official name for this visa is the EB-1 visa. It's awarded to individuals with extraordinary ability in their field. Think scientists curing diseases, tech visionaries changing the world, or, you know, supermodels turned first ladies. Crockett didn't buy it. She bluntly called out the fact that this visa is notoriously hard to get unless you're a Nobel Prize winner or have single-handedly rewritten the laws of physics.
The idea that Trump and my Republican colleagues want to restore integrity and security in the visa process is actually a joke. Let me be clear, integrity is not snatching lawful visa holders off the streets and throwing them into unmarked vans. Integrity is not revoking visas based on social media posts that hurt somebody's little feelings because kids decide that they want to go after Trump or this administration. We have a thing called free speech in this country.
Her question was simple. Now, what's so extraordinary about Melania? And before anyone jumps to the defense of her modeling career, let's get real. It's not like being featured in a magazine automatically makes you a contender for this kind of visa. Critics like Crockett have implied that Melania's marriage to Donald Trump may have played a much bigger role than her resume. Now, to be fair, Melania has never publicly revealed the exact details of how she qualified for the visa, which wouldn't be an issue if the Trump family hadn't constantly championed stricter immigration policies. Crockett called out what she saw as a glaring double standard, how Melania's own pathway to her legal status contrasts with the rigorous vetting applied to many other immigrants.
Not everybody could marry Donald Trump, and I think that's quite an achievement. So I think she deserves credit for that. Nobody up here could have done it.
You sure right. I couldn't do it.
The Congresswoman's remarks quickly sparked debates not just about Melania's visa, but about the integrity of the entire immigration system. Was it fair for Melania to obtain the EB-1 visa with seemingly far fewer accomplishments than what's usually required? Isn't the visa supposed to reflect consistent, verifiable, extraordinary talent? Crockett didn't hesitate to stoke the flames by connecting the visa issue back to taxpayer accountability. If Melania's visa application lacked transparency, Crockett argued what else about her time as First Lady might be hiding behind closed doors. Suddenly, those $137,000 worth of flowers didn't seem like just a frivolous expense. They became a symbol for broader questions of trust. Of course, the Trump family didn't take this lying down. Donald Trump, in his typical blustery style, quickly dismissed Crockett as a desperate loser looking for attention. Not exactly a nuanced rebuttal, but hey, subtlety isn't his brand. What really made this moment explode, though, wasn't the Trumps clapping back. It was the public rallying behind Jasmine Crockett. Stand with Crockett started trending as social media users praised her courage to dig into a powerful family's affairs. Though some called her approach aggressive, supporters embraced her willingness to highlight potential hypocrisy and wasteful spending. Crockett may not have had all the answers, but she was asking the kinds of questions people wanted addressed.
We know that the Pope, yes, the Pope himself, decided that the church may need to have people that are going to escort people as they're going into their meetings, because the reality is that what they are claiming what they want to do versus what they're actually doing, the actions don't match up.
This wasn't just a minor political soundbite from a congresswoman. It became a moment of national intrigue, partly because it put Melania, who often stays out of the spotlight, front and center for scrutiny. Whether or not you agree with Crockett's tactics, she undeniably had many Americans wondering, what exactly was the Trump camp trying so hard to defend? And while all this unfolded, something else unexpected happened. Barron Trump entered the scene, pushing this feud into even stranger territory.
And then I have a very tall son named Barron. Has anyone ever heard of him?
Let's talk about that next. Barron Trump calling the cops? That's not exactly the headline you expect to see about the youngest member of the Trump clan, especially someone who's been famously private his whole life. But that's exactly what happened after Jasmine Crockett's fiery comments about Melania sparked nonstop chatter in the media. According to reports, Barron's reaction to what he saw as a personal attack on his mom wasn't to take to Twitter or even the family's megaphone, Truth Social. Nope. He went straight to the police, filing what's being described as a harassment report. Pretty bold for someone who usually stays completely under the radar, right? And just like that, a whole new part of this unfolding drama was born. Now, it's worth remembering, Barron isn't a kid anymore. At 18, he's officially an adult, which makes this police report even more interesting. The outrage wasn't coming from a minor upset about mean comments on TV. This was a calculated decision, signaling that Barron took Crockett's critique of Melania seriously enough to escalate it in a way most wouldn't expect from someone as low-key as him. We're talking about a guy who makes headlines just for walking through an airport being tall. So for him to step right into the middle of his family's controversies, that's uncharted territory. But what exactly set him off? On the surface, Crockett's comments were just about Melania's visa and her spending habits as First Lady. But to Barron, this apparently wasn't about politics. It was about his mom. Some have suggested Barron saw this as an attack on her character, not just her actions. And let's face it, being young and watching your family get raked over the coals in public isn't exactly a fun experience. If you grew up with the endless memes, punchlines, and press scrutiny that comes with being a Trump, you might feel the need to defend your family too. It's the kind of generational dynamic you often see with public families. The older ones are used to bad press, but the younger ones, they're not quite as numb to it. Of course, the Trump family didn't stay silent for long. Never once to turn down an opportunity for a good insult, Donald Trump apparently chimed in by calling Crockett what he famously calls anyone who criticizes him a low IQ individual.
AOC, look, I think she's very nice, but she's very low IQ. And we really don't need low IQ. Between her and Crockett, we're going to give them both an IQ test to see who comes out best. Now, I took my test.
Classic Trump move, right? Anytime the heat turns up, out comes the personal jab, aimed at derailing the actual discussion. Forget Melania's visa, now the headlines were about the name-calling. If nothing else, you have to admit this tactic has kept critics at bay in the past. But Crockett, she wasn't exactly shaken by the usual playbook. In her response, Crockett doubled down. She didn't waste time trading petty insults or backing off from the issue altogether. Instead, she leaned into accountability, pointing out the over-the-top response from the Trumps only proved what she was saying all along.
How about this new one they have, their new star, Crockett? How about her? Is that real? Are they serious about that? That's their new star? If that's their new star, they're in serious trouble. I mean, this is Crockett. Oh man. But we've done a job, but they've totally lost their confidence.
They'll go to great lengths to deflect any real scrutiny, and the public noticed. Within 2 days, the hashtag #StandWithCrockett exploded online, showing overwhelming support for her willingness to call out the family. Even people who weren't politically aligned with Crockett seemed to applaud her for sticking to her guns. It wasn't just about the flowers anymore. This was becoming a broader conversation about accountability and power. Barron's unusual step into the fray added another layer to this already chaotic story. For years, one of the defining features of his public presence has been silence. But now, with that police report, it's clear he's willing to take action when family boundaries feel crossed. Was it an overreaction? Some might say so. Others might argue that it's refreshing to see him stand up for his mom. Whatever your take, one thing's for sure. His involvement only made this feud even bigger. And while Barron may have been looking to quiet the conversation, his response did the exact opposite. Crockett's refusal to back down resonated strongly, turning the situation into a public relations nightmare for the Trumps. But this whole debacle also tapped into something much larger than Crockett or even the Trump family itself. Who gets to hold people in power accountable, and why does that make them so uncomfortable? Let's talk about that next. When Jasmine Crockett first spoke out about Melania Trump's visa and flower bill, the backlash from the Trump family made one thing clear. This wasn't going to blow over quietly. You've got Donald Trump slinging insults, Barron Trump dialing up the police, and the usual outrage machine roaring to life. But instead of backing down, Crockett leaned into her role as the underdog. And what started as a few bold questions about transparency turned into a full-blown movement with #Stand with Crockett lighting up social media. Suddenly, it wasn't just about pricey bouquets or immigration paperwork. It was about power, accountability, and who gets to ask uncomfortable questions without being shut down. Crockett framed the situation in terms most people could relate to. Her point wasn't just, hey, flowers are expensive, or why does Melania have an Einstein visa? It was, why do powerful people like the Trumps get away with little to no scrutiny while the rest of us can barely get a straight answer from the DMV? The $137,000 flower bill and the murkiness of Melania's visa application weren't the endgame. They were symbols of a much bigger issue: how tax dollars are spent and whether the rules really apply to everyone. People latched onto this message because it asked something they'd been wondering for years. What aren't we being told? What made this especially explosive was how the Trump family responded. Instead of addressing the questions directly, they tried to discredit Crockett, a strategy they've relied on countless times before. But this time, it didn't work. In fact, it seemed to have the opposite effect. Within 48 hours, Stand with Crockett wasn't just trending, it was exploding. People from all walks of life, from teachers to veterans to union workers, jumped into the conversation. Their stance wasn't necessarily about Crockett's politics, but about the principle of holding power accountable. They saw her as someone willing to challenge a family that, let's be honest, has a reputation for dodging tough questions. It showed how much people are craving transparency, especially when it comes to the government using taxpayer money. But what really struck a chord with the public was how unshaken Crockett remained. The Trumps threw everything they could at her: insults, pushback, even that eyebrow-raising move by Barron. And yet she didn't let the noise distract her from the bigger picture. She kept hammering home the same message: this isn't personal, this is about accountability. In doing so, Crockett became something more than just a politician with a viral soundbite. For many, she became a symbol of standing up to power, someone who wasn't afraid to push back even when the consequences could have been severe. This whole saga also tapped into a deeper frustration people feel toward those in power. By sticking to her guns, Crockett highlighted something we all know deep down, but don't always say out loud. There's an unspoken rule that certain people don't get held to the same standards as the rest of us. People connected with her actions because they saw themselves in her questions. Why are ordinary Americans scrutinized down to the tiniest details detail, while powerful families dodge even basic transparency. And that's what makes this story so much bigger than just a viral hashtag. It's not just about flowers, visas, or even the Trumps. It's about a question we all have to grapple with. Who's watching the people at the top, and what happens when someone finally demands answers? Sometimes it only takes a cracked vase or a $137,000 flower bill to expose a system built to hide bigger problems. Jasmine Crockett, with her pointed questions and bold approach, reminded everyone that asking for accountability isn't just disruptive, it's essential. Barron Trump's unusual reaction and the Trump family's furious response only highlighted how deeply those in power fear public scrutiny. And maybe that's the real takeaway. The truth has a funny way of shaking things up, even from the so-called little guys. So what happens when power meets the fear of being exposed? We might just see it unravel.